When Mark, the new CFO, called our pension benefit freeze a minor adjustment, I knew my own funeral had begun. He said it with a cold tone, as if discussing an insignificant software update. Not a word about the 2 decades I'd put into building Catalyst Interactive from a scribbled idea on a napkin into a leading company in the gaming industry. Not a single personal call, just an email. It was one of those frigid HR messages, choked with corporate buzzwords about financial optimization and resource restructuring. Your pension benefits are temporarily suspended pending a cost optimization review. No greeting, no signature, not even a single extra comma to give it some humanity. I sat in my kitchen, my robe still damp from the dryer, toast untouched, rereading the email as if it might change itself. As if I stared hard enough, the words would reorder themselves into something more human. But they didn't. They never do. And that was the moment, sitting in that dim San Francisco kitchen with the refrigerator humming like a sad jazz bass, I realized they'd already buried me. They'd said their little prayers, tossed in a budget-cut flower, and moved on to appease their venture capitalist overlords. If you're listening to this and thinking, damn, that's cold, then do me a small favor and hit that subscribe button. Yeah, I know. 97% of you just lurk around here, eavesdropping on our chaos without commitment. Toss us a like or a sub. It keeps the team going when corporate decay like this makes us want to scream into our coffee mugs. All right, back to the slow-motion train wreck. See, this wasn't just any pension freeze. This was my pension. 20 years of late-night meetings, crises, emergency offsites, acquisitions, firings, and recoveries. I was the one they called when vendors walked, when servers burned, and when our first COO tried to expense a yacht, and we had to plug a $6 million hole overnight. I never asked for the spotlight. I liked being the scaffolding, unseen but essential. And now I was just omitted like a typo, as if the past was an inconvenience to their spreadsheet. But they'd forgotten something. After that email, I stood up, opened the cabinet above the fridge, the one no one ever looks in because it's where old warranties and dead pins go to die. I pulled out a thick black binder. The front label had yellowed with time. E. Parker, Founding Docs. I blew off the dust like I was waking the dead. Flipped past the incorporation filings, original team bylaws, early equity splits, and then I found it. Clause 14D. I'd written it into my founder's agreement back in 2005 after my first lawyer, God rest his sneaky soul, insisted on it. Any material adverse change to the employee's compensation package shall trigger an immediate severance payout of $25 million USD, payable within 72 business hours. At the time, it felt ridiculous. We weren't worth $25,000, let alone $25 million. But he said, Elena, one day this company's going to get big and stupid, and when it does, you'll want a kill switch. I thought he was being dramatic. Turns out he was just early. I read that clause again, slower this time, like it was an incantation. My finger traced the line where I had initialed in blue pen, just under the board chair's spidery signature. It wasn't ambiguous. It wasn't vague. It was a bomb with a 3-day fuse, and the bastards had just lit it. I didn't scream, didn't cry, didn't throw anything. I just closed the binder, made myself a second cup of tea, and opened Outlook. The email to Catalyst Interactive Legal was short. No drama, no threats, just a subject line. Clause 14D activated. I didn't expect fireworks, but I knew this much. They'd stopped seeing me as a person. They forgot I'd helped build the foundation they now stood on. They thought I'd go quietly. They were about to learn that a legacy doesn't vanish just because you stop including it in your PowerPoints, and that some contracts, especially the ones written on sweat and spite, never expire. Clause 14D wasn't just words on paper. It was the quiet snarl of a forgotten god. I stared at it, printed in that clunky old SIF font, tucked between dusty pages of a contract no one in the new regime had ever bothered to read. The wording was perfect, Not legal ease, not bloated, just surgical precision. Any material adverse action to the undersigned's compensation shall immediately trigger a severance payout of $25 million USD, payable within 72 business hours. I chuckled, actually chuckled, the kind that sneaks out when the universe stumbles into poetic alignment. I remembered writing it with Bruce, the original company lawyer, back when the office was just 4 of us and a fax machine that screamed like a demon every time it worked. He'd said, "You're going to get screwed someday, Elena. Might as well make sure they pay you for it." We were laughing then, drunk on cheap scotch and the smell of new drywall. I never thought I'd actually use the thing. Honestly, I'd forgotten it existed until HR decided I was worth more as a line item than a human being. The clause wasn't tucked in a side addendum or one of those nebulous subject to board approval riders. It was right there, page 19, and it was never struck out, never replaced, because nobody ever thought the quiet woman with the tea-stained blouses and the owl pin collection would pull the pin. But I did, with all the fire of a bored librarian filing overdue fines in the middle of a riot. I scanned the page, took a screenshot, and attached the original PDF we had notarized in 2005. Then I typed a short note to my lawyer, David Jones, still on retainer after all these years. Subject line, Clause 14D, just checking. That was it. 5 minutes of my time. I closed the email and went about my day. Watered the peace lily, cleared my inbox, helped rewrite a client brief some hotshot PM had butchered with a thesaurus addiction. Just another Tuesday, except this Tuesday had a nuke hiding behind my ceramic mug. David called me 3 hours later. "Elena," he said, his voice like gravel in a leather pouch. "That clause is still very, very active. There's no rescission notice, no amendment, and since you never converted your founder's agreement into the new executive comp package, they're screwed." I could hear him smiling through the phone, the kind of smile that comes with invoiceable hours and someone else's panic. I didn't smile back, not yet. "Good to know," I said. "Let's keep it quiet for now. I just wanted confirmation." He hesitated. "Do you want to send a formal notice?" "Not yet," I said, sipping my now cold tea. "They need a chance to insult me first. It makes the paperwork taste better." He laughed. "You always were the calmest grenade in the room." Damn right I was. I hung up, opened a fresh file on my laptop, and started organizing the digital paper trail. Old board minutes, original offer letter, emails confirming my status over the years, every little breadcrumb that would prove they'd never voided my rights. It wasn't a revenge plan. It wasn't some grand heist. It was just a woman checking the lock on a door she built 20 years ago and finding out the bolt still held. The thing about corporate amnesia is that it's contagious. New blood comes in, gets high on buzzwords and quarterly targets, and forgets how the floors got laid. They think loyalty expires with the version of Excel they use. They forget that some of us didn't just work here. We are here, woven into the goddamn drywall. So I sat back, a document window open, the clause highlighted. They'd made the first move. My job now, honor the contract. They wanted to cut costs. Let's see how sharp their scissors really were. Subject line, Clause 14D. Message body. As discussed, due to the recent freeze on my pension benefits, Refero HR 456B, I am invoking Clause 14D of my founder's agreement. Please confirm payout timeline and point of contact for wire details. EP. I proofread it twice. No exclamation points, no capital letters, no threats, just the kind of email that tastes like static, quiet, dull, and laced with high-voltage consequences. I hit send and watched the message vanish into the same system that had just tried to erase my legacy. Then I took a breath, finished my chamomile, and walked into the Tuesday strategy meeting like nothing had happened. The room was full of the usual suspects. David with his undercooked MBA smirk, Jessica pretending her rebrand presentation wasn't copy-pasted from a consulting deck, and Mark, our CFO, clacking his pen like he thought it made him sound authoritative. I sat in my usual seat, didn't speak, didn't even open my laptop, just observed. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Mark C. Collins at catalyst.com. Elena, Clause 14D is from a legacy doc and was superseded in the 2018 comp restructuring. Legal agrees it's not enforceable. We're not processing that. Best, Mark. Best. That little bastard ended a multi-million-dollar denial with Best. I stared at the screen so long my tea went tepid. He just dismissed a 20-year contract like it was a calendar invite glitch. I didn't reply. Mark was the type who treated people like errant spreadsheets, easy to close, annoying to reopen. But here's the thing. I never signed the 2018 comp restructuring. They'd sent it. I'd reviewed it, and I'd returned it with one note. Original founder status unchanged. Will retain standing agreement. They filed it. I had the email confirmation. And now someone on their legal team was about to discover exactly how airtight my paper trail was. Enter Sarah, junior associate, fresh out of Northwestern, probably still paying off her student loans. She replied to Mark's email chain, CCing me, probably by accident, with a short, hesitant note. Sarah L. Sanchez at catalyst.com. Hi all. Just flagging that I located a notarized version of the original founder agreement from 2005. Elena's signature is present, and there's no formal rescission or override documented in subsequent comp files. Still reviewing to confirm enforceability. Will update shortly. Still reviewing. That was the sound of a crack forming. By lunchtime, I'd gotten exactly one Slack ping from Jessica asking if I could take a peek at the mission statement language again. Still feels kind of boomer. I gave her a thumbs up emoji. Meanwhile, I was quietly compiling a digital folder titled Enforce 14D. Inside, PDF scans, email threads, meeting notes, and yes, my rejection of the 2018 restructure with timestamps and delivery receipts. They wanted to pretend the clause didn't exist. Fine, I'd give them a map. By late afternoon, the mood had shifted. Barely. You wouldn't notice if you weren't trained in watching faces for tremors, but Mark kept glancing at his phone like it was giving him indigestion. Jessica's second urgent meeting got mysteriously canceled, and Sarah, she didn't reply again, but someone in legal requested access to our oldest HR drive. That drive hadn't been touched in years. I know because I built it. I finished out the day as I always did. Reviewed vendor contracts, approved 2 purchase orders, and scheduled next week's QBR. Nobody noticed the extra glint in my eye, the subtle steel in my posture. Because when people think you're harmless, they don't see the spark under the surface. I didn't want a war. Didn't need revenge. I just wanted what I was owed. And if Mark and the board wanted to play dumb, then I'd let the facts scream for me. Politely, of course. Nothing. Not even a read receipt. 3 days passed, and not one person from legal or the C-suite acknowledged my message. Mark was radio silent. HR was pretending their little pension freeze was a hiccup, like I wouldn't notice my retirement vaporizing midweek. And legal. Oh, legal was doing what legal does. Stalling, sweating behind NDAs, hoping if they closed their eyes long enough, I'd just retire or die quietly in the corner. They didn't understand what kind of silence they just purchased. I didn't escalate. Didn't stomp around the office like some over-caffeinated department head demanding answers. I just documented every message, every ignored ping, every timestamp. The folder I'd started, Enforce 14D, was now color-coded, indexed, and mirrored to a private cloud server I'd had since the Yahoo era. Nothing dramatic, just a slow tightening of the noose. Professional, quiet, surgical. Then the static started. Vendor reps canceled next quarter's partnership calls. One of them, a guy named Mitch I'd known since fax machines were still a thing, left me a voicemail. said they'd heard rumblings of instability and were reassessing risk exposure. Mitch doesn't use words like exposure unless he smells smoke, and for Catalyst Interactive, that smoke was starting to seep under the doors. At 7:42 p.m. that night, I got CC'd on an email by accident again. Bless Sarah. Internal counsel at catalyst.com from Sarah L. Subject: Clause 14D verification follow-up. Her signature is present not only on the founder's agreement, but also on the original bylaws. I've compared them against the digitized archive and the hard copy vault scans. No override has been executed. No board amendment rescinds the clause, and her rejection of the 2018 comp package is acknowledged and time-stamped in legal's inbox. Clause is active. That clause is active. It hit like a siren behind closed doors. Not for me. I'd known it was active since the second I took that binder off the fridge, but now they knew, and the longer they said nothing, the more radioactive it became. I began assembling the final dossier. Not for court, not yet. Just preparedness. Board minutes from the 2005 approval meeting. Check. Original offer letter from July 2005. Check. Email chain rejecting the 2018 package. Check. Notarized hard copy of the clause, including signature match from the internal registry. Check. Even a photo of the original framed newspaper clipping. Catalyst Interactive Secure Series. Founders Elena Parker and David Lynn lead the charge. My name was printed in ink before most of the current leadership even had LinkedIn accounts. I saved it all to an encrypted drive, then printed a physical binder copy just in case someone got stupid and tried to accidentally delete shared folders again. This wasn't paranoia. It was protocol. You don't survive 2 recessions, a hostile takeover, and the Silicon Valley ego complex without learning to expect cowardice wrapped in a polo shirt. Meanwhile, at the office, nothing looked different. Jessica was still spitballing synergy ideas like a wind-up pitch deck. Mark was still sipping green juice and calling it a reset. If you listened close, you could hear it. The tightening. An executive assistant whispering in the hallway. A rescheduled board audit meeting with no reason given. Security clearance changes on internal doc access logs. A few sudden out-of-office messages from the same clump of directors who championed the pension freeze. None of them spoke to me directly, but I felt their eyes lingering in meetings. The way they avoided my gaze, not out of malice, but a fear they'd see themselves reflected in it. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even insulted anymore. I was focused. They thought they were playing defense. They didn't realize I'd stopped playing altogether. I was simply aligning dominoes, and gravity was on my side. The call was supposed to be routine, one of those glossy finance briefings where executives assure investors that everything's under control while tap dancing around a dumpster fire. I joined in mute, as I often did. Camera off, name labeled just E. Parker, wedged between half a dozen acronyms and guys named Brett with too many vowels in their last names. Mark, our CFO, kicked things off with his signature smug calm, the kind that made you want to throw a stapler through a window. We've identified and resolved a minor contractual inquiry regarding a legacy executive agreement, he said. Minor, like a paper cut. It posed no material risk and has been internally addressed. Internally addressed. That was rich, considering I hadn't received so much as a calendar invite, let alone a response to my last email. But then came the spin. Our liabilities remain well within projection. The leadership team is committed to fiscal clarity and minimal disruption during this transitional optimization phase. They were tap dancing barefoot across a minefield. Every syllable reeked of someone trying to outrun a clause they hadn't bothered to read. I didn't speak, didn't even flinch. I just jotted down a few notes, time-stamped the call, and saved the recording. 12 hours later, my lawyer called. Elena, he said, his voice unusually tight. You're going to want to see what just came in. It was an anonymous tip. A whistleblower leak funneled discreetly through his firm's encrypted intake portal. No attachments, Just a screenshot. An internal Catalyst legal email. Short, brutal, from Mark C. Collins. Legal review team subject Clause 14D. Let her push it. She's too old to fight this in court. We stall her out. She'll cave or croak. Either way, we win. I stared at that line until the screen blurred. Too old to fight this. I'd been called many things in my life. Tenacious, reserved, intimidatingly composed. But this was the first time someone had tried to weaponize my years against me like they were a weakness. As if 2 decades of keeping this company upright through crises, lawsuits, staff walkouts, and economic implosions were just an expiration date. I didn't shake. I didn't slam anything. But the shift inside me was tectonic, cold, permanent. I opened Outlook and began drafting an email to board@catalyst.com. Subject: Clause 14D whistleblower evidence attached. Dear Board, please find attached a screenshot of internal communication from your CFO, which was submitted to my legal representation via a whistleblower protocol. The message in question explicitly details your executive team's awareness of the contractual validity of Clause 14D as well as an active strategy to obstruct and delay lawful payout based on my age. As a reminder, Clause 14D was confirmed as enforceable by independent counsel and remains unamended and in effect. This correspondence represents not only a breach of internal ethical conduct, but a documented attempt to suppress a legal obligation via age-based discrimination. Please confirm wire transfer instructions and timeline by Friday. Failure to respond will result in the immediate filing of injunctive relief, interest accrual activation, and notification of your financial institution and compliance officer. Regards, Elena Parker, Founding Partner, Catalyst Interactive Inc. Yes, I hit send. This wasn't negotiation anymore. This wasn't diplomacy. This was enforcement. By Thursday, I noticed Mark had cleared his calendar for the week. Legal stopped replying to routine messages. The finance Slack channels turned into ghost towns. One director's assistant emailed me directly asking if I'd be attending next quarter's strategic offsite. I responded with a single sentence. That will depend entirely on your compliance with your own bylaws. And now they weren't just ignoring me. They were afraid of me. Good. Let them sweat. Let them pace through conference rooms whispering legal hypotheticals that all ended the same way, with my name on a 7-figure wire. I wasn't bluffing. I was boiling cold and slow. The kind of anger that doesn't shout, but burns through marble. By Friday morning, a storm was foaming at the edges of their glass tower. I knew things had gone critical when the usual legal foot-draggers stopped replying altogether. Not even a canned received, reviewing internally response, just radio silence, which in legalese means panic sweat, the kind that stains wool suits and gets billed at $900 an hour. Mark was nowhere, gone. No Slack presence, no calendar entries, no sign-ins on the access logs. It was as if someone had yanked his cord mid-presentation and shoved him into a non-disclosure dungeon with bottled water and 2 lawyers whispering damage control. They'd escalated to external counsel by then. Some high-dollar firm out of New York that specializes in crisis containment. The kind of people who refer to whistleblowers as information leaks and believe NDAs are spiritual doctrine. But even they couldn't magic their way out of it. Clause 14D was too specific, too narrow. It didn't give room to interpret or stall. The penalty wasn't subject to arbitration. It wasn't to be reviewed by a compensation committee. It simply was. The clause was an axe tied to a tripwire, and they tripped it while blindfolded, drunk on their own austerity metrics. When their lawyers finally acknowledged me, it was through a bloated email stuffed with conditional language and posturing. We dispute the material applicability of Clause 14D and assert that its invocation lacks contemporaneous justification. I didn't even finish reading. My lawyer did, and his reply was only 5 words. Injunction request filed. Clock running. That same day, our internal server logs were subpoenaed. Every HR email, every legal draft, every Slack thread with the words freeze, retire, too old, was now flagged and replicating in a compliance vault faster than Mark could delete his browser history. I heard the word cost-cutting had become untouchable, like saying Voldemort at Hogwarts. Entire fiscal decks were being rewritten just to avoid triggering compliance protocols. Then came the investors. A legacy fund partner, Harold Stinson, white hair, ugly ties, and a handshake like warm concrete, cornered me in the elevator. "Elena," he said, clearing his throat like someone about to start a war. "Is it true what I'm hearing about a clause? A penalty?" I didn't blink, just tilted my head slightly and smiled the way you do when someone asks a question they already know the answer to. Harold stared for a long moment. Then he stepped off the elevator. Word spreads fast when old money gets nervous. Meanwhile, Mark tried one last desperate maneuver. He filed a motion internally to have the clause reviewed under good faith negotiation rules. Basically, a bureaucratic Hail Mary. If they could prove I was acting in bad faith, they might delay the penalty until arbitration. My lawyer filed the injunction the same hour. The court's response came in swift and clean. Denied, clause active, payment required, interest now accruing. The dominoes were falling so fast you could hear the wind between them. I didn't celebrate, clink glasses, or call anyone. Instead, I opened the company dashboard, the one I still had quiet admin access to, thanks to a permission tree no one had ever thought to update, and watched a meeting titled Emergency Compliance Review. Investor briefing appear in Mark's calendar. 30 minutes blocked off, no guests invited, only one attachment. Contingency wire scenarios. That was when I knew they weren't looking for a way out anymore. They were looking for a way to survive what was already coming. And me? I was still, entirely still, like a lighthouse in a hurricane. No longer warning ships away, just watching them crash one by one. For 20 years, I'd been the quiet solution, the backstage hand pulling every crisis back from the edge. But now, I wasn't pulling. Let them fall. Friday came like a ticking bomb in a linen envelope. No fireworks, no grand apology, just the absence of a wire that should have landed by noon. 12:01 p.m. My phone didn't buzz. 12:17. My bank app showed no new deposits. By 12:30, it was over. The window had closed. 72 business hours from initial notification as outlined in Clause 14D. They'd missed it. Whether out of arrogance, panic, or sheer stupidity, they'd let the clock run dry, and with it, activated the clause's next paragraph, one they definitely hadn't read. Interest, 3.2% per business day. Automatic escalation to default status. Notice to third-party fiduciaries and banking partners triggered. Insurance review clauses kicked in, and the best part, my attorney didn't even have to lift a finger. It all happened the moment his notice hit send. At 10:04 p.m., David forwarded me the email. Subject: Legal Default Clause 14D Penalty Enforcement to Catalyst Legal, CC, Compliance Officers, Treasury Liaison, External Counsel. As of Kobe today, Catalyst Interactive Inc. is in legal default of Clause 14D of Miss Elma Lena Parker's Founders Agreement. The payment window has expired without wire receipt or approved extension. As such, all contractual penalties are now in effect, including compound interest clauses, fiduciary escalation, and immediate creditor notification. Please refer to the attached enforcement summary for next steps. Simple, clinical, devastating. Within an hour, I heard the first scream. Not literal, but the kind that travels across buildings through missed meetings, panicked messages, and frantic badge swipes. CFO Mark Collins resigned by 3:15 p.m. The company email was a short internal announcement, 2 paragraphs, 1 lie. After careful consideration and with deep gratitude, we announced the departure of Mark Collins, who is stepping away for personal reasons. Mark has been an instrumental part of our journey and leaves behind a legacy of growth and innovation. Legacy of growth. Cute. The only thing he left behind was a crater the size of our entire liquidity pool. Word spread like a gas leak. Slack channels went dark. Compliance started mass restricting document access and locked down all cloud drives between finance, legal, and operations. Standard protocol when external litigation is imminent. From my end, it was quiet. I sat in my kitchen, watching steam curl from my tea like a ghost stretching its limbs. The birds were out, little gray wrens bouncing along the feeder I'd meant to refill. The neighbor was mowing his lawn with a lopsided push mower that squealed on every third rotation. It was a normal afternoon, perfectly mundane, except for the fact that a Fortune 500 was hemorrhaging itself to death in a boardroom 30 floors above a salad bar. I didn't feel vindicated, not yet, but I felt still. The kind of stillness you get after a storm flattens the air. My lawyer texted once more that day. Just one sentence. They've started calling the banks. I didn't reply. Instead, I stirred my tea again, slowly, deliberately, as if each circle in the mug was erasing a decade of slights. Every time they talked over me in meetings, every time they handed my insights to someone younger, flashier, more disruptive. Every time they asked if I'd considered retiring to spend more time with family, as if I hadn't spent 20 years babysitting their messes. They called it cost-cutting. I called it a reckoning with interest. The fire didn't start with a bang. It started with a number. On Monday morning, Catalyst Interactive's credit line, $80 million of sweet liquidity, was quietly frozen by the bank. No email, no negotiation, just a triggered clause buried deep in their lending agreement. Any breach of a material internal contract resulting in a payout over $10 million shall result in an immediate risk reassessment. Breach, 25 millimeters. By noon, a ripple turned to a tidal wave. Payment processing slowed. Vendor invoices bounced. Payroll approvals delayed. Someone in finance tried to initiate a standard wire transfer and got hit with a transaction unavailable flag. Word spread like wildfire in a locked office. By 2:00 p.m., an emergency board meeting was in motion. I knew because 3 members rescheduled investor calls back-to-back, citing urgent realignment. Translation: they were scrambling to explain why a legacy agreement signed in the Bush Sr. era had just sucker-punched their quarterly forecast off a cliff. By Tuesday, the vultures arrived. Business Insider ran a headline: Founding Clause Costs Catalyst $25 million. Pension freeze sparks legal meltdown. Then Bloomberg picked it up. Hidden clause, visible consequences, Catalyst's CFO fallout, and the 25 mm blunder. And my favorite, from Fortune, she didn't yell. She just collected. They all requested interviews. 6 journalists, 3 podcast producers, 1 guy from a finance YouTube channel who offered to do a dramatic reading of the clause. I declined every single one. My only public statement was issued through my lawyer and posted in 12-point Times New Roman on a white background. I did not sue. I did not threaten. I enforced what they agreed to. Elena Parker. Nothing more, because the truth didn't need decoration. By Wednesday, Catalyst Interactive stock slid like oil on tile, down 18% in 5 trading days. The board tried to halt the bleeding with a press release about operational recalibration and temporary resource consolidation. Translation: layoffs. 57 employees got calls that week. Some of them I knew, good people. People who kept their heads down and did the work while execs played musical chairs with efficiency initiatives. They didn't deserve it. But that's the nature of corporate combustion. It burns everyone, even the ones holding water. They didn't mention my name in the layoff memos, but every hallway whisper traced back to me. Elena's clause, Elena's penalty, Elena's bomb. I wasn't gloating. There was no thrill in it. No fist-pumping triumph. Just a deep, full-bellied stillness, like the air after a backdraft sucks the oxygen out of a room and leaves behind silence and ash. I spent that week doing normal things: grocery shopping, watering the ferns, fixing a leaky faucet the super had been ignoring. The world outside still turned. Kids laughed. Dogs barked. Life carried on. Meanwhile, inside Catalyst Interactive, the architecture trembled under the weight of its own arrogance. At night, I sat by the window with my notebook. No TV, just a pen and the soft rhythm of a rocking chair. On one page, I wrote, "They wanted me quiet. I gave them contractual compliance. They wanted a legacy without liability, history without memory, a spine without a voice. Well, they got a lesson in remembering, and the ledger wasn't done balancing just yet." Monday, 9:06 a.m. The deposit hit like the quietest earthquake in banking history. One line buried in a sea of routine statements. Incoming wire, $25,000 of settlement clause 14D. No calls, no follow-up, just digits. Unmistakable, undeniable, and absolutely earned. My attorney confirmed the wire by 9/11. His message was short, almost amused. It cleared, and then some. A few minutes later, the new CFO, some internal puppet named Jeremy, who'd been sitting 2 levels below Mark just a month prior, sent me a gravelly thin email. Subject: wire confirmation and apology on behalf of Catalyst Interactive. Dear Ms. Parker, please accept this confirmation of the full severance payout in accordance with Clause 14D of your founder's agreement, along with the accrued interest and legal fees as stipulated. On behalf of Catalyst Interactive, I sincerely regret the oversight and the circumstances that led us here. Your contribution to this company's legacy is immeasurable. Warm regards, Jeremy L. Hartman, Chief Financial Officer, Acting. Warm regards. They always reach for warmth when the check clears. I didn't reply. What was there to say? My signature was already stamped in the infrastructure of that company, in the original source code, in the crisis protocols, the policy manuals they'd renamed but never rewritten. I was Catalyst. They just forgot until it cost them everything. I left the house that afternoon with no fanfare. Just a small duffel bag, my notebook, and a thermos of black tea. I drove 6 hours upstate to a lakeside cabin I'd bought years ago and never told a soul about. No signal, no inbox, no headlines. I lit the fireplace, sat on the deck. The wind slapped the corners of my face raw, while the lake glittered like cold glass. In my lap, a leather notebook I'd been writing in since the first HR meeting, where I realized I was becoming invisible. Stamped on the cover in worn gold letters. Lessons they forgot. I flipped past pages filled with little observations, warnings, old quotes, boardroom missteps, names underlined in red, a list of every VP who mistook my silence for surrender. On the last page, I wrote just one thing. They built the company on my back. I left with what I was owed, no more, no less. I closed the notebook. The storm was over. And they would remember me, not because I burned it all down, but because I never had to raise my voice to make the walls collapse. The lesson from this story is that your value never expires. This is a testament that patience, meticulous preparation, and adherence to your principles are a powerful, quiet force, no matter how others underestimate you. You are the foundation, the architect of your own life. Never let others redefine your worth.